Well, we're going to get going, and for those of you who had people that may wanted to have been here tonight, we are recording it, and so we'll have information on how you can share that with your friends and neighbors. And we're just so glad you're here tonight for Kids and Technology, which is devised reimagining tips and tools for how do we use technology? How do we moderate its use in our lives? And I'll introduce myself. I'm Leslie Hanscom. I'm the Director of Community and Family Engagement here at Valley Community Presbyterian. And one of my main purposes here on staff is to be outward facing, is to really to say, how can we as Valley, as this place, who've been part of this neighborhood for 80 years, work to support and enhance the lives of families, especially the next generation. And with me tonight is Pastor Robin Garvin, who is also on staff here. So we're just so delighted that you're with us as we really kind of dive into what is technology in the lives, especially in the lives of kids these days. And I have the great pleasure of introducing Doreen. And we realize tonight that our relationship goes back 31 years, because I first met Doreen when she brought her son to a baby and child class that I was teaching. So not only have we raised our kids, and our kids are friends, but we have really walked through how technology unfolded in the lives of our kids. My son would say Doreen is probably the sole reason that he didn't get to play some computer games as a child, because I would often use Doreen's words, "Your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed," especially in the area of empathy. And the early research showed that the more that kids played violent video games, is their ability to have empathy decreased. So when he was 18, he called me from Biola University and said, "I'm 18, and now I'm going to play Call of Duty." And I was like, well, I don't know what I can say to that, John. But I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Doreen, and she is such a gift to all of us who are raising kids and to all of us who are trying to say, what does technology mean in this time and place? Doreen is a licensed psychologist in private practice here in the Portland area, a published author, and tomorrow, just shared with me, she'll be moderating and facilitating the Oregon Youth Summit, where they'll be bringing youth leaders from across the state. And tomorrow's topic is social media and technology. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Doreen, and you will be in for a really interactive, fun experience.
Talk I give is, whoa, hello, wow, is to just say that if you have questions, please hold on to them, and I will make space at the end for them. With this topic, everybody has a story, and oftentimes, and everybody has a big question, and oftentimes, if we interrupt the flow for the question, it's something I'm going to get to, and it will make better sense in context. So it's not that I'm trying to be bossy about the time, however, I'm kind of bossy about the time. So I want to always share with everyone that I'm talking with that the information I'm going to give you today is not just my opinion. You can get a lot of opinion on technology. It is everywhere you go. Instead, it is based on 15 years of research that I have done that have resulted in these two books, and also a continuing, ongoing anecdotal research circle of young adults. Many of these are folks that I met in university, college, campus speaking tours that I did when I first started talking about this topic 15 years ago, and now they're in their 30s, and I have a research circle of about 1,000 people that I'm checking in on. So I have some up-to-date anecdotal but clinical research as well as kind of the hard data. Anymore, children are born into a world, and parents birth children into a world that tells them over and over and over this message. Push, push. So kids feel like they were born for the internet, and we tell them over and over and over now, even at younger ages, that their best experiences will be had online. And so it's sort of on us that our kids are in worse shape than they've ever been. And in fact, when I start at a college or a high school, the first thing I do is get on my knees, I'm not joking, and ask for the audience's forgiveness. Because my generation has handed them this incredible, gorgeous, beautiful, sparkly tool, and then done nothing but talk smack about how they use it. We talk horribly about kids and teens and technology, and we have done very little to help them know how to use technology moderately. I'm sure many of you have seen these reports. They have been in almost every major evergreen publication that we have in the last year about the increase in mental health issues for teens, and now this year what we're seeing is a preponderance of these kinds of feature articles about middle schoolers and late elementary age kiddos. We are in a crisis in our country. And I believe that a lot of that has to do with, and not just my opinion, but some of the research tells us that the way in which children are interacting with technology really plants a lot of seeds for this. I am not a person who thinks technology is all bad. Clearly, I love it. I use a lot of it. I just think that if we could begin to become moderate, and the earlier that we can begin to think about moderation, the better off our children will be. My favorite group of people to talk with in terms of parents, my favorite group of people to talk with right now are high school and college students who are just in mass moving over to flip phones. They are getting off of social media. They are feeling the negative effects of this stuff. But my second favorite group is pregnant mothers because they can really think about the way in which they want to start the trajectory with tech. Because it is one of those things that we habituate to very quickly. Would you rather never start to smoke or try to stop smoking? We'd rather never try to start, right? It's easier. However, we all have habituated. And now, one of the best-selling toy lines even to infants and preschoolers is the Fisher-Price Aptivity line. These are a line of toys that you insert a smartphone into, and the child learns to kind of interact with the phone. Can you see the little thing underneath where it's got an iPad in it? We are just acclimating at younger ages, and once the introduction is out there and kids feel engaged with their technology, it's pretty hard to approximate embodied experiences that are that immersive and that sparkly. Does that make sense? I'm all about call and response, especially like if you guys want to snap or amen or whatever you want to do, I will take all of it. I am not here to shame anyone. Usually in groups, especially if I'm in groups where there are partners, parent partnerships, I will see at one point one of them, elbowing the other, and then a little later the other one's elbowing back and making a face. I am not here to shame anyone. I am also not here to say that technology is all good or bad. It is not benign. Technology, the apps that we access, the devices that take us to those, were not built by child development experts. Neither were they built by mental health professionals. They were built by people who are making money and who are building these places and objects based on what they call in the industry the hidden curriculum. And the hidden curriculum is to keep us attached to our devices and within each app as long as possible. So what I tell high schoolers and elementary school kids, middle schoolers, is that they have no chance. Millions of dollars are spent to keep them attached to those devices and to keep them scrolling within the same apps. So what I'm about is trying to help you all think about the fact that the things that I say tonight that you say, well, that would never happen in my house, you're wrong. Pretty much you're wrong. The things that we feel like are very extreme now are very commonplace for our junior high and high school kids. The things that in like 10 years ago, the things that college students were exposed to, now we're seeing the exposure to those kinds of things in 7th and 8th grade. Everything is trending down. So don't feel this kind of superiority or it's not me, and don't feel shame either. Let's just kind of be honest about the waters that our kids are swimming in and that we are swimming in, and think about how we might want to do that with intention. If you take nothing else away from tonight, it is that your best hope about moderating your own technology use and making sure your own mental health stays sound even in interacting with these spaces and or that of your children is if you can learn to emotionally regulate. If you can learn to have a big feeling. What happens right now when we have a big feeling? We feel tired at the end of the day, we go and we stream movies, or we play a video game, or we get on Pinterest, or we get on Facebook, right? None of these things actually regulate us. So if we can begin to think about how is our skill toward emotional regulation, toward coming back to a sense of calm and centeredness, not needing to be stimulated at all times, that's our best skill, no matter what age, if you're talking about a 2-year-old or if you're talking about an 82-year-old. This is the skill that is our kind of wraparound care. Okay, so we have to talk about what happened after 2020 because the research is just now starting to come out. We have really good quality, high quality research about where we were before 2020 then, with technology. Then we all know everything became technology based, right? And so we have to sort of look at the landscape. So pre-2020, on average, the longitudinal studies that are done that are very well constructed showed that the average American over the age of 13 was interacting with screens 10.5 hours a day. Now, the way we get to that number is that 80% of our technology use is done with more than one device. So we're multitasking with multi-devices. Does this make sense? You're watching a movie on the flat screen and you've got your tablet, or you're texting and you're listening to a podcast. That if you're doing 2 activities with 2 devices, or even 2 activities with 1 device, the researchers felt that they had to put those hours side by side to control for the impact on the brain in particular. 10.5 hours a day is a long time. And it's not as though when we got these beautiful, shiny things, we got an additional 10.5 hours a day, right? That time has to come from someplace, and it comes from 4 crucially important places for both psychological development in children and emotional regulation in adults. These are the 4 areas that 10.5 hours a day comes from. It comes from family talk time, the time you're sitting around the table, and you have those really boring, long, awkward, silent moments, and you just have to live through them, or you say the exact wrong thing and someone blows their top. These are really important things for growing in our emotional regulation and our robustness. It also comes from social practice time. Social practice is just the time that we are in proximity of other people and we realize that we can do that and live through it. And this is a major thing that kids no longer get. This sense of that we can just be with other people and we make weird eye contact and then we don't know what to do and then maybe we trip and then we can still be okay. You know, this is also a very important thing for people across the lifespan. Sleep, we are seeing less sleep across every age demographic right now, over the age of 5, which is a pretty consistent age that kids get screens at bedtime. So we're seeing less and less sleep. And there's some early research now that is suggesting, it's really well constructed, suggesting that just the presence of a smartphone in a bedroom, even if it is not next to the bed, diminishes REM cycles of sleep. So anything we can do to get that ambient, what I find, especially when I talk to folks who are able to really articulate how their technology impacts them, having a smartphone in your pocket or on your bedside table or somewhere creates this kind of ambient awareness that things are happening that you don't know about. And in particular, if you are somebody who is very dependent on what is happening in the world with either your social circles or your gaming circles or a boyfriend or girlfriend if you're in high school or college, that creates an ambient sense of distraction at all times. Does that make sense to you? And so that what people call this fear of missing out, I find it less to be a fear of missing out and more a constant sense that I'm missing either information or data or get the ability to participate. And then finally, physical activity. This time comes from the time in which we would normally move our bodies, which is super important for mental health and for, I'm gonna cross through this, sorry, everybody. That projector is very warm. Okay, the other just overarching truth that I want to share with you all tonight is that we know that social media has a profound impact of all the kinds of media, especially that kids, since tonight is based on kids, of all the kinds of media that kids consume, social media is the biggest. And these are things that fit in the category of the bowl of social media. Video gaming, that is a form of social media now because we play our games in enabled ways where we're interacting with folks. YouTube is a social media. TikTok is a social media. So think about all those things. We know now, we've known for a long time there's been good research that says there's a correlational relationship between anxiety and depression, that fear, that ambient sense of agitation and fear of missing out, and also relational aggression. In the last 2 years, we have 2 well-constructed studies that show that excessive social media use, and this is research specifically with young American kids between the ages of 13 and 20, what do you guys think that the researchers coded as excessive social media use? How much time? What would you guess?
More than 10.5 hours.
Yeah, so, right? Excessive social media use would be like in the hours, right? They coded it as 30 minutes. So we now know that 30 minutes of social media use for individuals, kids in America between the ages of 13 and 18, can cause depression, can cause anxiety, can cause this sense of agitation, and can cause relational aggression. That's pretty important to know. We also know that social anxiety is on the rise in children. Have any of you noticed this or seen this in your own experience, that anxiety is just is rampant, right? And if you think about it, that is also directly in a lot of the research related to that sense that there is always ambient awareness of something I need to be doing, or something that somebody could be seeing about me, or I need to manage, or I need to be keeping tabs on. Then, this is all pre-2020. Then 2021 hit, and here, let's take a little pulse on America. What's the first thing we all did? We all hoarded toilet paper. It's like, we're gonna not go out of our houses. Let's make sure we've got enough for ourselves. Then we moved everything in home, and this became a huge source of stress. Not only did this become a huge source of stress, but we, for the very first time in our country, saw that the YouTube use of children just went up astronomically. And if you talk to anybody who's not afraid of being in trouble, who was in school in that time, and ask them what the hardest part of COVID was, they will say, the hardest part was trying to tamp down the temptation to watch YouTube while they were in class. It's what everyone did. We also see some interesting things happen for the very first time across all age demographics. A video that had existed prior to 2020 became the most viewed YouTube clip of all time. And I think this is interesting. This was about week 4 into the lockdown. And this is when everyone was making those really great schedules, and everyone was thinking, oh, it's just gonna be a couple weeks, this is gonna be so fun. And this is the video that went viral. Right? Everybody was just like, oh, we're so happy. You got to get a little bit stuck in your head. Just 1 second. You're welcome. Baby shark, do-do-do-do-do, baby shark, do-do-do-do-do, baby shark. Right? Okay. So this gives us this false sense of like everybody's happy, we're all at home singing Baby Shark with grandma and little one. And then 2 weeks later, we saw the same thing happen. Something went viral across all age demographics on Netflix that we had never seen anything catch like this. And it happened to be this. Let's see where we were in America.
It's not every day that a zookeeper went to prison.
How many of you watched this? Yep.
There are more captive tigers in the U.S. than there are in the wild throughout the world.
Animal people are nuts, man. They're all crazy. I'm sure y'all got a story to tell.
So the reason I bring that up is because this was Tiger King. And when I talked to people at the time, because everyone was watching it, and would ask them, why are you watching this? And they would literally, 201, say, because it's the only thing that can make me forget how horrible everything is for 45 minutes, because everything there is even worse, right? And the reason that I bring this up is because this also became a time where I started noticing a real trend happening. And that was families becoming less careful about what they were watching while their kids were all at home. And this is one of the big findings that is now coming to light, is that younger kids saw much more intense content. They felt the anxiety of their parents. They knew that everything was kind of going sideways. And I think we're having a hard time coming back from that. This is a study from the Early Childhood Department of Education, and they talk about how so much content was viewed by younger and younger children, and parents just became less and less aware because we just had less bandwidth. We were all freaked out and scared, right? So now we kind of have to think about the fact that not only have we habituated to high levels of tech use, but we have a generation of kids exposed to content much higher than their developmental capacity, but they've created kind of a proclivity for it, right? So we've got to think about that. Another thing happened right about this time is that for the first time, there's a big, I'm sure many of you remember this, a survey that goes out in high schools across America asking what kids want to do when they grow up. And for the first time ever, YouTube star was the #1 answer. And the reason I bring this up is because kids were going home and saying, I want to be a YouTube star, and their parents are going like, that's not a thing. It's a total thing. It's a real, real thing. This is like video gamers who say they're going to make their future and make their career on Twitch. They can totally do that. I mean, people really do that. But there's such a divide between what parents and children are exposed to and know about that I just have incredible empathy for young people trying to grow up right now. Because they are facing, this is a reality for them, but they have no one who can help them think through that. Is that reality for them or not? We have parents who are freaking out because they think that's really weird. And I'm just hoping that we can all kind of work together tonight to sort of get on the same page about where we are. I don't think everything is as hopeless as a lot of times we feel, but I do think that it's time for us to begin having really hard, complex conversations with ourselves and with our kids about how they can thrive. I'm actually going to skip this. No, I'm not going to skip that yet. Okay. The other thing that is important for us to think about, this is just kind of talking about where we've come, and we're now kind of in the situation where we have fed a very strong dependence on technology. We no longer know how to live through awkward moments. We now have enhanced our technology so much that we really can do everything on our tech. We could go a whole day and not interact with anybody. You can order your meal, pay for it ahead of time, pick it up at the counter, have it delivered to your door. And so for the fact that social anxiety is on the rise and the difficulty in having parent-child interactions is real, we need to find some practical ways of thinking about it. So one of the things I want to tell you about is that just one tiny thing we could do is start exposing our brains, our bodies, our relationships to awkward moments. Exposing ourselves to stimulation that is in embodied spaces that lasts more than 30 seconds. This is like now a radical act of mental and social health for children. One of the things that we see now, the place that kids spend most of their time, and I did look, and in the Portland metro area, the two highest apps accessed right now are TikTok and Snapchat. The average time spent on TikTok for users in this area is 3 hours a day. That's a lot of time to watch these constantly, moving videos. These are the three most viewed TikTok videos in a 6-month period last year.
The B, it's M to 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 the B, bang.
High quality educational entertainment. I bring this up because when you're used to just scrolling through 30-second videos, and now if you don't like the first 10 seconds, you just scroll on to the next one for 3 hours, you have wired your brain. What is it like for you to go into a classroom and try to listen to one teacher with nothing moving around? What is it like for you to be in an educational setting where teachers are not aware of this and are not adapting to it? And what is it like when your parent wants to sit down and have a long, hard conversation with you when that is literally how you've wired your developing brain? We have to really think about this. Leslie referenced the prefrontal cortex. If you take your hand and make a little model, and I will tell you, it's easy for me because I'm not their mother, but when I go to high schools and middle schools, kids eat this stuff up when you show them what is happening. So if you can find ways of introducing them to this, it can be really helpful. This is a model of the brain where this is the brainstem, this is the reptilian part of the brain. It's just responsible for moving, breathing, burping. Back here is this region of the brain that's responsible for encoding of long-term memory. This is the part that is responsible for deep, critical thinking skills. This part of the brain is the hardest part for neurological pathways to reach. You have to really be dedicated to get wiring back here. Up here is the frontal lobes. That's where information comes in and gets mapped out to where it needs to go. This is the emotional centers of the brain. And then tucked deeply in, you'll feel between the tip of your finger and the top knuckle. This is the prefrontal cortex, and you'll feel it has access to every region of the brain. This is the CEO of our whole ability to function. It's responsible for attuned communication. It's responsible for the ability to focus, literally to focus. To hear a text come in and not look at it. That's the part of that brain. It's the part of the brain that is responsible for an ability to stop a behavior when you realize, oh, this is a really bad idea, right? And this is also the part of the brain that is not hardwired until about age 21. The thing we know about technology is most forms of technology stimulate this region of the brain up here on the left side and in the back. Most technology misses this. The only thing that creates stimulation in the prefrontal cortex really robustly and reliably is this. Anybody feeling a little awkward? Quiet, stillness, nothing, pauses, spaciousness. These things bump wiring into the prefrontal cortex. And actually, our brain only wires together where we create firing opportunities together. So in a world where we no longer have to be bored, just Laura Ingalls just had to just walk all day, and then there's a stick, and then you go oh my gosh, it's a doll, you're just bored, and you just have to create this prefrontal cortex that is also responsible for creativity up here. Now you can go an entire day with no spaciousness, nothing bumping wiring into here. So we have to help our kids, and this is where I have so much empathy, because we've created a reality where there is a lot less robust wiring up here. And already this was a part of the brain that was not reliable for them. Okay, there are 4 areas of impact, and I just talked a lot about the brain, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more in a bit. But we also want to talk about the other areas. So the other 4 areas are our sense of embodiment, the way we are in our skin, our brains, our relationships, and our sense of self. About 5 years ago at the Consumer Electronics Showcase, which happens every year, and they rate all the new tech toys and tech things, it's just everybody loves it. This was rated the #1 toy. It's called the iPoddy. Now, anybody see a problem with this? I do, right? At a time where you're wanting to teach your children to pay attention to their own bodily functions, right? Why would we offload that onto a screen? However, the reality is that our children are seeing us do this all the time, because we know now that 80% of texts from white men in their 30s and 40s come from when they are sitting on the toilet. Our children see us bringing these devices in, and we then are modeling. And what we are doing speaks much more loudly than what we are saying, right? We also have become quite dependent upon our fitness trackers. We wake up in the morning, and what do? You look at your wrist to see how your sleep was. That's bonkers, y'all. You could just wake up and go oh, how do I feel? Did I sleep well? But we are offloading onto data so much of what we used to know in our skin. And what happens over time is that makes it such that we get the feeling, or we have the belief, that really the experiences that can happen in online spaces are more exciting or better, or the data we can get from it is better than anything we can intuit in our own selves. That's problematic. We saw during COVID times a real increase in the use of substances by children. Everything from caffeine and energy drinks to the use of weed, all of them went way up in kids about age 10 and up. It was a little bit alarming. And what I just kept thinking is, when you go from having all this stimulation to having very little stimulation, and then all of your stimulation is with a screen and the same people, that is a way you can make your body feel different. And so, again, becoming aware that by not keeping fiery opportunities available to our children, edgy opportunities that make them feel like they're sort of getting away with something, experiences that are more exciting than embodied ones, we put them at risk for substance use. We also live in a time where almost every image that any of us, it's not about young people, any of us see is doctored. I love this Target ad. You can see down here where the artist went in to remove the inner thigh and then forgot to fill the bathing suit back in. Do you see that? I love when these things happen, because then we can talk about it. We have young kids, and this is one of the things I hear the most when I'm on a school campus of any age, is that children have really tricky experiences online, such tricky experiences online. They feel as though they are facing all kinds of bullying. They are facing the knowledge that other people are doctoring their images online, and so they'd like to do the same. But they don't feel like they can go to their parents, because their parents' response will either be, well, you shouldn't be on that app anyway, or take your phone. And that's just not okay. Our children's phones have become a part of their social support, a part of what helps them be connected. And so we can't just like we couldn't yank, one support of the Burnside Bridge off and expect that the whole bridge would stay up. We can't just yank a phone. We have to think instead about how to have these hard conversations. So one of the things I want to challenge you to do is start thinking about, with your teens or your kids, how they feel about their own appearance even in online spaces. What does it feel like to them to be in spaces where there are apps that you can download that literally just change the shape of your body or your face? I'm about to show you one. So in the last 8 months, there's a new filter on TikTok. It's called the Bold Glam filter. And it is just blowing everybody's brains because it's the first time that we've had really great filtering availability for videos. That's a big deal right now because of deep fakes in the political world. We're going to see more deep fakes than we've ever seen. So, people can take one single still photo of you and make a video of you with your voice saying something that looks so real that even experts can't tell. But the way this plays out with our kids, I decided, because I got asked to do several interviews about the Bold Glam app, so I thought I better download this and get a look at what it is. So this is very vulnerable. On the right, you're going to see the reference issue. I thought I had to push things to take pictures, but it was actually really videoing me the whole time. And you'll see how much it just sexualizes and plumps everything up. Do you see this? Yeah, I sit around on my couch at night playing with my apps and blowing kisses into them, I guess. I mean, I'm just making faces, but do you see what this is? This is what we have access to now, and this is what kids have to then try to compare themselves to. And it's a really big issue. So around embodiment, one of the biggest things that I am just talking to parents about right now is helping your kids understand that you understand how much pressure they are under. It's just the empathy of it is more than anything else. Interventions I'm just going to give you, and if you want to take pictures of these slides, I'll also get them to Leslie so that they can go with the video, but these are things that you can do to address the issue of embodiment. You can make your home welcoming to the body. Leslie's home is this way, my home is this way. There are bins of Legos. I mean, they're only grown people that live in our houses, but bins of Legos. My husband had all his actor friends over a couple weeks ago, and they all were discovering all these fidget toy baskets and bins of Legos, and I heard one of them say to the other one, "Is Doreen autistic?" But I just have this stuff out because if you have this stuff out, more than likely your kids will engage it. They'll forget where their phone is. They'll forget where they leave it. Establish screen-free zones and keep them screen-free. So nobody takes their phone in their room. Nobody takes the phone in the bathroom. Attending to all the senses. Really making sure you've got smells and touches and things that are not just sight and audio. We've got to get more stimulation outside of tech than in. And then we have to just talk about our own expectations about bodies and kind of give our kids grace to live in the body that they're in, and also learn how to have hard conversations that don't just judge, shame, or discipline them. Okay, the impact on the brain. This is some new research that just came out that during COVID, adolescents' brains aged faster. It's pretty troubling, and so now Mayo Clinic is doing a large-scale study. But we know that their social skills are down, their brain aged faster, meaning that just is an indication of stress level and specifically emotional distress. And so they are working on not full cylinders. We already talked about the brain model. The thing that we didn't talk about is this upstairs part of the brain is what's responsible for higher order processing, and the downstairs is thoughts and feelings. The left is more rigid, the right is more chaotic. When I was in graduate school roughly 1,000 years ago, we thought that the brain was like a filing cabinet, and you needed a math skill, so you went to the math file. Now we know that actually a healthy brain is much more like a tangled jungle, and we want firing and wiring all through the brain. So if we are exposed to, for instance, boredom or silence or nothingness, actually we have stimulation and firing through all the region of the brain because the brain is going emergency, something is wrong. Does this make sense? Because it's so not what we're used to. We want to think about how we can enhance executive function, which is that prefrontal cortex, how we can push wiring into it. But again, we now have schools that require technology use. I'm learning more and more in a lot of Portland schools. In elementary schools, they're showing videos to kids while kids are eating lunch every day. They are using video as their reward time, so they get device time instead of playtime. We are setting these folks up, so it's up to us to be loud about this. We also live in a time where we model for our kids all the time. When we can't figure out an answer to something, we just Google it. Stop doing that. Maybe just don't know for a while. Or use another way. But if we could begin to model some of these slower things, Because let me show you, I'm going to show you some compelling video that shows what has happened over time. The first clip is from the beginning, the very first season of Sesame Street. And if we know that the brain wires together where it fires together, whatever we expose the brain to is what will create propensity in the brain. So if we expose the brain to something, the brain becomes good at it, right? So we want to count the sustained visual shot, meaning how long we have to look at one thing before it changes, to see what kind of robustness we're building in the brain for the ability to focus and wait. And then I'm going to show you 2 segments in 20-year gaps after. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 14 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. So you see, all right, 20 years later, 30 years later, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. See what's happening? And now this one, you will notice there is never a sustained shot. There is always movement on the screen. And what I will tell you is that this is what educational content looks like. Now, early reader books are like this, where there's constantly something zooming in or something popping up. How did that feel? Not great, right? And yet this is just what we are giving them. It's not them. It's not that they don't want to focus. It's that we have kind of fed them this. What the brain research, well, what every neurologist tells us is that wherever we don't create wiring in the brain, whatever we don't expose the brain to create the propensity for, that region prunes off. Literally just wiring stops going there. Now, the beautiful thing is that our brains are what is called neuroplastic, so we can rebuild the ability to focus. But right now, if you talk to, I spoke at a pediatric conference recently, and the main reason they invited me, and their whole topic of their conversation is how do we get wiring into the prefrontal cortex? Because again, it is related to everything. I'm just going to say a couple of tiny things about ChatGPT. This is another thing where parents go like, ah, and then they don't talk to their kids. ChatGPT is pretty cool. It is pretty amazing. And so this is another place where before you freak out, before you form opinions, try to have some conversations with your kids. Let them educate you about it. Use it as a family together. And then begin to talk about how it might have an impact on things like critical thinking in the long run. But find ways of being moderate. Okay. I'm going to talk briefly about this just because this is another thing that so I'm the weird one in all my kids' friends as growing up who talked to all the kids about sex and porn, and I just talked about everything. And people are desperate to talk about it. Kids have had such hard experiences. On average now, 4th grade boys are exposed by 4th grade on average, and girls are exposed by 6th grade on average. And they want to talk about it, and without being able to talk about it, it creates a real passion inside of them. I'm working with a couple families right now. Both have young elementary school girls who are profoundly addicted to pornography. And part of what makes it so addictive right now is that I checked this again last night. Pornhub is very proud of their statistics. The average Portlander interacting with Pornhub, which is the most easy place to access porn, is usually on for an 11-minute prolonged period, and in that 11 minutes, 13.9 sites are accessed, which means that less than a full minute, we're onto a new thing, kind of like Sesame Street. And one of the most common things that happens on college campuses when I'm there for a couple of days, I always just sit in public places and hope people will come talk to me, and usually by about the 3rd day, that's when I get the flood of students who said, I think I've broken myself. Like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to have a sexual relationship with a real person. Because and there's a lot of fear about it. It makes me very emotional because I feel like these kids are out there suffering and we don't know how to talk to them. And all it takes is a couple really hard conversations and then for a grown person to say, how can I help you step back? How can I help you create some new fiery experiences in your body? That's all it takes, but it's so hard. In terms of interventions for your brain, just limiting, if any of you have little ones here, wait as long as you can until you introduce whatever new technology it is. If your kids are already pretty adapted to it, try to start exposing them to some slower moving content that is high quality. Teaching self-soothing skills, this is the biggest one, because if we can pause and soothe ourselves, we've done a great thing, right? It's a neurological miracle. Our prefrontal cortex is wiring. So learning about self-soothing is huge. Forcing delay of gratification some of the time. Celebrating opportunities for boredom. That's what the project I'm working on right now is called Welcome to My Boredom Party, and I've started hosting boredom parties where you come together and there can be no alcohol for the first half hour and nobody can bring anything that they've planned, and you just have to sort of figure out together what we're gonna do. But boredom has the power of really doubling. Well, what we know from the research is that 10 minutes a day of mindfulness meditation, contemplative prayer, or rhythmic exercise that kind of gets you in a zone doubles the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex and doubles the myelinization in the prefrontal cortex, meaning the power and efficiency of the brain. So I'm starting to research, would boredom do the same thing and be much more accessible to all of us? The Dutch have a word called niksen, N-I-K-S-E-N, and it is roughly translated as to do nothing deliciously. So 10 minutes a day of doing nothing deliciously. And if you could do this with your teenagers, doing that instead of trying to limit a tech might actually even be more powerful, helping them do 10 minutes a day of nothing. Okay, the impact on relationships. This video sums up how I think technology changes our relationships. Know your dog better through technology, right? Understand what you've been missing. Basically, it's going to tell you it's a revelation in love, right? I'm sorry. It's not true. But this is what we do with social media all the time, right? We look at data and we go, oh, they're doing so well. Or, oh, everybody's doing, and kids are especially at risk of this. They trust what they see, or we trust what we see based on curated content that is intended to capture our attention. We don't post the photo that's not going to get looked at, right? And so we have to really begin to help kids and help ourselves think about, actually, this is an easier way of communicating with more people and having more attention. However, it may not be a reliable form of data collection in terms of relationships. We especially know that adolescents crave the social rewards that they can find in places like social media, but they don't have any restraint. And so they can also interpret likes as sort of votes for them. This is where bullying kind of goes sideways, and we're having a huge issue with cyberbullying right now in Portland. It is becoming a huge issue. And this is another place where if you can say to your kids, I know that horrific things happen in online spaces, and I will promise you, now then you have to be able to keep this promise, I promise you that I will wait 24 hours before I take some wackadoo intervention if you tell me that something has gone sideways on social media. Just that will give the child space to tell you something. What they are terrified is that a parent is going to hear what has happened to them, and the parent is going to go, I'm calling the principal, I'm calling the other parent, you know, and then it's this, like, suddenly it is out, it is a fireball gone wild. And if we can just promise our kids that we will help them, it goes such a long way. In my group of parents that I work with, this is a huge thing that has been a very big help, is when they have committed to that with their kids have started coming to them with what's actually happening in online spaces. This is just an analogy that I use a lot of times with kids, and it works really well. I talk about if I'm going to run a race and I haven't eaten and my stomach's growling and I'm at the beginning of the race, I can just grab my water bottle and swallow the whole water bottle. My stomach will stop growling, I feel full, but I'll get like to half a mile and I'll realize I have no calories for the race, right? That's what social media is like. It's like we take it in and we fill ourselves up with what we feel like our friendships, but they don't have the sustenance to take us in the journeys on the long road. Does that make sense to you? This one really just interacts with kids well. Okay, interventions. Keeping your interpersonal skills in tune. This means being the weird adult who talks to kids everywhere you go in line, like, how are you doing? How's your day? What did you eat for breakfast? Like, whatever your questions are. Watch your way about talking about others. This is another thing. Kids are hearing their parents talk in such divisive ways right now. You know, being really careful about our own communication, talking about relational aggression, pausing between our impulse and our reaction. Yeah, and then just also offering your kids lots of opportunities to be with a wide range of people, not who are all like you. Making sure that you are exposing your kids and being in spaces as much as you can where you are the odd person out and they have to watch you figure out how to navigate that. The impact on the sense of self, and I'm going to fly through this, is just that we are living in a time where kids are really forced, even in school, like now 8th graders at many schools have to create a LinkedIn profile. What in the world are we doing? And that's so that they can keep tracks of all their volunteer activities and all their mentors and things. But this is again saying, create an online version of yourself that you can later sell, right? And so it's just these subtle messages. So in order to counteract that, we need to talk with our children about sort of self-love and self-awareness. I want to always be encouraging parents to talk to their kids about, it's really easy to live with an external locus of control, meaning all our stimulation, all our soothing, all our feelings about ourselves come from outside of us. The likes we get, our friends' encouragement, our accomplishments. But what we want instead is an internal locus of control, where when your child feels stressed or when you feel stressed or have something ridiculous happen, you can slow down and come inside and go, okay, I've lived through that before. I can live through that again. Or, oh, that would really blow up my life. Maybe I'll stop doing that. Or, oh, when I did that before, it really freaked my parents out. Maybe I should. These are the things that will help. We also have to think about the fact that our children now, most children in high school for sure, and even younger, have been training their algorithm since they had access to accounts in elementary school, right? So I see this a lot with young adults who are struggling with eating disorders, and they heard about their sibling dieting or their mom dieting and started looking up at library time. You know, they felt chubby or whatever, and they started looking up dieting tips. They trained their algorithm to start feeding them that so that by the time they're in high school, now they're actually getting eating disorder tips when they're searching. When they're on Instagram, the ads they're getting are for Slim Fast. Or does this make sense to you? You can see how this then also happens with violent content and happens with sexual content. So again, talking with our kids about, I know that my favorite statement, and I've had so many parents tell me that it really worked with their kids, is to say like, I know that this technology that I handed you has brought you exposure to some amazing things, to some really horrific things, and to some things that feel amazing to your body and your mind, and also feel a little weird. And when that happens, you can come to me. I know this stuff happens. I'm not going to freak out. You have to make good on that. You go freak out with your friend later or whatever, your therapist. But we have to be empathic about how this is happening. We also, if you have a middle school or high schooler, you need to know that one of the most accessed places in TikTok for high schoolers across the country and middle schoolers is mental health TikTok. These are accounts that specifically talk about mental health. They're usually children, adolescents, and they also have this underlying subtle message that you won't get real information about your mental health from the professionals. They don't know what they're talking about. I'm a reliable resource. We now have a real preponderance across the country of young girls diagnosing themselves with borderline personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, and autism. I mean, it is like bonkers. And it is primarily, the only thing we can really account for is this rise of mental health TikTok. This is the kind of sage advice you get in mental health TikTok.
Happens if you take a cold shower every day, the heart rate is gonna go down with 20, 30 beats a minute.
This one just is basically saying if you take a cold shower every day, it will fight your depression and anxiety. This one is just...
So you have anxiety. I'm willing to bet you wake up 1 to 2 times during the night to go pee. I'm also willing to bet you have poor digestion or you're like having diarrhea or constipation, you know.
This one goes on to say that that's how to know if you have borderline personality disorder, that one. And it just goes into all these things then that you can do to cure your borderline personality disorder. This one we're not even going to watch. It's so frustrating. But so again, if you can know about this and talk to your kids about it, like you're going to get information. It isn't always reliable. The two most at-risk groups of believing false information are younger people and older people, actually over 60. Because we older people have not been raised to know, like my sweet mentor who is brilliant, she's just such a brilliant, badass woman, 85, and she constantly saying, well, I saw it on YouTube, so I'm quite confident it's real. You know, it's not really. So making sure you're talking about that. This is just your 3 things to remember in terms of a sense of self. Higher amounts of technology use are correlated with lower abilities to focus, to delay gratification, and to regulate our emotions. FDR, those are things we can remember. So any intervention you can do that increases focus, having a different kind of slow-moving technology rather than fast-moving, building in a 10-minute boredom practice. Delay of gratification, also huge. Anything you can do to say, you're not just going to respond to your things impulsively, you're not just going to flip around, and then also that you're going to privilege emotional regulation. The best way to privilege emotional regulation is to think about the fact that our devices do not soothe us, they just distract us from our tiredness. That's all they do. They actually create increased tiredness. So if we can help our kids find kind of fiery, interesting ways that they can soothe their bodies and their minds, it will be very beneficial to them. We're going to skip this one too. Ultimately, if every American would commit to being inconvenienced, uncomfortable, and bored, at least for an hour every week, we would change things. I'm serious, like just not order things or not be on our phones. These 3 things could change everything. All right, so if we can teach that internal locus of control, let them see you when you're really upset. Like, I'm so upset, I just want to pick up the phone and call someone and just chew them out. But I'm going to get control. I'm going to soothe myself. I'm going to calm myself down. Really helpful. Allowing failures, this is so huge. Teaching your children how to live through failures, not how to avoid them. Teaching emotional regulation skills, addressing focus, delay, and regulation, and then doing your own work so that you can be a resource to your child. This just means becoming a non-reactive parent, doing what you need to do to be able to be available emotionally to your kids without shaming, judging, or being so angry. I just share 988 because it's such a great resource and a lot of people don't know about it. It is a mental health hotline now. Instead of 911, you can call 988 at any time, and you are actually helped by a mental health professional, not the police. And so this is a great resource for you to also give your kids because we have such diminished capacity or sense of self right now and such high levels of mental distress. Okay, the next 5 to 7 minutes, I'm going to give you a bunch of tools. So ready, set, go. And there's all kinds of stuff on my website where you can dig a little deeper. But I want to share with you just a little bit about how some of these tools came to be. As you can tell, I have a lot of strong opinions, and then I have a lot of desire to research them and find out if they're true or not. But when I was first doing this research, my poor children were constantly like, oh, mother. And one night they decided we would have an unplugged night. So they got out all my old Life magazines, and we had no electricity. We had, like candles. And within about 5 minutes, my head was going to explode. Because in every Life magazine, there were ads like this. This glass of Tang is healthier than a glass of orange juice. Anything cooked in Wesson oil is healthier for you. Or this one, it's never too early to start your kid on 7-Up, right? We are not a country that is good at moderation. When World War II ended, we suddenly had this ability to have convenience foods that we had developed, and we liked them a lot. So what was intended to be like a side dish very quickly became the main dish. And then about 10, 15 years later, we see hypertension, high cholesterol, high blood pressure issues like we had never seen before and tied it to our diet. Put out the food pyramid and everything's better, right? Not so much. We have habituated. And again, that's what has happened here. It's just the same retelling. We just are not moderate. We are not careful. So these are 6 steps that you could, and if you want to take a picture of this, these are the most potent things in all of my research and working with families for the last 20 years that you can do. The first technology habit worth breaking is to not multitask. Just some of the time, just do one thing at a time. That means if you are washing the dishes, you are not listening to a podcast. It means you're just washing dishes. If you are listening to a podcast, it means you're just listening to a podcast. This is probably the most radical act of brain health that we could do right now. And instead, we're just finding more and more ways of making technology smaller and smaller so that we can have more of them attached to our bodies at all times. Stop avoiding boredom and stop foregoing idle time. Start using your little moments of idle time to actually practice a boredom practice. There's all kinds of resources on my website for that. You can use things like fidget toys or those kinds of things for that creating boredom. Boredom just means really doing nothing cognitive with no stimulation. So no music. You could have like a bowl of kinetic sand that you could play with because you can't form that into anything, but not like a number game or a crossword. That's cognitive. So using your little moments of idle time, the time that you're standing in line, the time that you're at a red light, and actually trying to build these things. If we could put some of our communication into embodied spaces, asking our children to make one phone call a month. This is a huge issue. Youth do not want to make phone calls. So finding a safe way they can practice making at least one phone call a month. Stop escaping everything, this hyper-escapism into our phones, and instead work on that internal locus of control and then work on self-soothing. Okay, these are the big 5, I guess. 1, 2, 3, yeah, big 5. Okay, so the first thing is, I want to give you a way that you can assess. You know, here's all this information. How can you assess where you are with tech or where your child is with tech? I just use oh, the hand doesn't show up. That's weird. There's supposed to be a hand there. You can see it on my computer. And it just goes A, B, C, D, T. With youth and teens, I wrap it, but I will not make you have to go through that. But it's just A, B, C, D, T. And you can write these things across the top of a page and the names of everyone in your family across the bottom of the page. That first one is, what is my child's ability to focus, delay, and regulate? Maybe you put it on a 5-point scale. You know, they're pretty great at. They can focus. They don't get distracted. They can just delay gratification. They can regulate. Or, oh, child number 2 can't do any of those things. You know, and that gets reflected in the assessment. B is balance. This just means, is there a balance? What is the balance between embodied and digital engagement that my child or that I have? If I have to read, well, yeah. No, I'll say that later. But you know, do you have enough embodied experiences to counteract the negative impacts of the digital? See, this one I would get in a lot of trouble raising this finger by itself, right, in a crowd. This is context and content. If you are only consuming violent, sexualized, fast-moving content that is monetized, meaning, you know, advertisements, it's going to be it's going to create a lot of dependence in your brain. Whereas if you're using slower moving content, if your child is watching documentaries or doing research online trying to find the cure for Ebola, you know, that's no problem. We're great. D is our level of devotion. In our country, this is a ring finger that often shows if you're in a devoted relationship. How devoted to you are your device for wisdom in your embodied life? What this means is, if you have to access 5 reviews of a restaurant before you walk in, that's trouble. Like, sometimes you just have to get food poisoning, because for the sake of spontaneity, like you have to go like, oh, that smells good or looks interesting. If we are only doing things based on what we can learn about them ahead of time, that's already showing we've diminished that capacity for critical thinking, for deep thought, and that's really real to pay attention to. And then T is time. First 10 years I did this, that was always the first and only question. How much time should my 3-year-old have online? How much time should my senior in high school? Time is irrelevant outside of these other 4 dynamics. If your child can focus and delay and regulate, they're watching pretty good content, they have like a hobby, they run and they do gymnastics and they love to talk to people, their content is, you know, mostly slow moving and age appropriate, and they don't need to rely on their device only for communication. They don't have to text everybody, they can actually have a conversation. They can spend more time there in digital spaces. It's telling you that things are going okay. Does this make sense to you? So this is invaluable. The second thing is just to build boredom tolerance. This is a very boring slide. Just do this thing, okay? The next one is to create and to be aware of how you use your content. The one thing I don't know why these things aren't showing up, but one thing to know about content is that anything that a child creates in a digital space is going to be better for them and more building of their sense of self, their ability to delay, their ability to persist, than anything they just consume. So if your child is constantly consuming video games, maybe get them involved in coding, so they're actually creating a game. If they are just, you know, watching anime, help them learn how to create anime. That's another thing that is anybody in here have kids who love anime? Okay, I'm not even going to go down that path then. But then the other thing, there's usually a pyramid there. I don't know why it's not showing up. But you want to use more of technologies and try to encourage kids to use more technologies that connect them, things like FaceTime with grandma and grandpa or friends. Even things sometimes like Snapchat, or things that are connecting more than things that they're just purely consuming. We also want to use technologies that educate. So finding fun and interesting, Common Sense Media is a great source for finding really great, reliable, interesting media for all people of all ages. My website also has a list. Then above that, we want to use a little less than those two. We want to use technologies just that entertain, right? Because those are the things that are fast moving, that are missing the prefrontal cortex. And then I wish we could say we wanted nothing of like the violent content or the malicious content that comes with some ad stuff, or violent sexualized content. But that exists in our world. If your child, or if you are using that, try to make that this little tiny thing at the top that you access less. So when you're trying to change a habit, if you've got a kiddo who plays a very violent first-person shooter game, you want to try to get buy-in with them about how that might be impacting their mental health and their sense of well-being in the world. You want to find a game. Actually, John is a part of a focus group that helped me talk about this at Biola. When you talk to people who play first-person shooters, they don't start playing them because they want to shoot people. They play them because they have the best graphics, the best interface, the most beautiful kind of flowing landscapes, because they have the most money. They also have like seamless, really fun strategy. Now we have a preponderance of video games that you can find that have that kind of rich environment and great strategy that don't include violence. So what you do is you start saying, how about if you play the game you have been playing for 15 minutes less, and you add in this super strategic, beautiful game for that 15 minutes, and then you start trying to even it out. That's going to work much better as you're trying to switch content. Okay, in terms of just looking at games, these are things that you can sort of think about. A fixed mindset just says, I do certain things and I get certain rewards. You know, I punch the button 10 times and then I get a prize. A growth mindset says, I have to try some new things and be creative, and I might fail, but in showing that I can be creative and I can stick with it and persist, I get a reward. I get the reward of feeling good about myself. So games that reinforce a growth mindset model are always going to be best. We want games that use real-world principles, meaning like conflict resolution and actually, people who like actually do more than just shoot and kill each other. So we want some pro-social skills. And then we also really want if your child is wanting to play on your phone and you've got one of those game conglomeration sites on that has an ad they have to watch and then they get access to the next game. And a lot of parents don't think about it. They're just like, oh, these are free games. The ads are not good, just in terms of, again, what they're creating, the reality in the brain. And then we want to, in terms of the D, we want to not be a denier. We don't want to be in denial about what our kids are facing online. Our kids are facing hard stuff, and that does not make them bad kids. It makes them kids in the US right now. It really just, that's all it does. And so the more, instead of feeling like, oh, we need to make sure our kids are perfect online, no, we need to make sure our kids can come to us. We need to make sure that we are telling our kids and nodding to them that we know how tricky these spaces are and how impossible they are to avoid. I have a good friend, and I asked her if I could share this, but her child is in 6th grade and made her way in a very child-appropriate app where they're talking about video games that are very age-appropriate, but of course there are nefarious people everywhere. And she made her way into one of these chats where some older girls were talking about mental health and convinced my friend's child that she probably had dissociative identity disorder and not to tell her parents because they wouldn't know what to do, but she could meet them. You can see where this is going, right? And again, what that kiddo needs, rather than a big overreaction, is this like, oh, wow, this is hard. Because that parent went to the school and tried, this is happening on the school Chromebook. The school won't allow the parent to block that site. That's tricky. Now we're in tricky land. Our kid has a device that they have to use in 6th grade, right? And so this is another place where our best bet, is this making sense? Our best bet is this connection and complex conversations. These are just the things that I tell people in terms of having these conversations, is to listen more than you talk. Just always. Like, say your first sentence and then shut up. Just because after your first sentence, your kid hears this. When you have heard what they have to say, just repeat it back. Not like this way, like, I hear you saying, because then they'll go like, did you talk to your shrink today? Instead, say, like, am I right that I'm hearing that this is what's happening? Those kinds of things. Ask for consent. When they share something with you, ask them if they would like to hear from you about thoughts and ideas and feedback. Don't just give them. Like, oh, I hear what's going on. Would you like my thoughts on it? Does that make sense? This is a big one. And then finally, treat your kids' disclosures with real respect. Yeah, just this emotional regulation, I keep hitting it. This is step down. If you do have an issue where you've gotten into some tricky content, you want to make sure that you make the changes in small increments. This is the slide I was talking about when you start integrating a new kind of technology in. And you want to really be willing at the same time to increase the embodied activity. So like if your child is super into racing games and they can't break away from racing games, put some families together and rent PIR for a day and let your kids drive on the race. I'm not kidding. Whatever it is that they can get. And then finally, just emphasizing embodiment. This is just, this is having all those small things around, having a home that is rich. I'm going to just fly through a couple of examples. Your kid is told this every day.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're watching the screen. Everything is awesome when you're sharing a meme. The interwebs fails on springs, just to name two
The
awesome
lyrics
things.
are saying like the
Promotion,
interwebs
games,
and everything is awesome when you're staring at the
everything.
screen.
Apps that please, more selfies, endless hours of the best TVs, brand new apps, shows to go, awesome internet that's super whoa. Shows, bros, foes, they're awesome. Games, flames, and wings, they're awesome. Everything you want, or send or share is awesome. Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're dancing in jeans. Everything is awesome when you're watching a screen.
Xfinity,
Everything is awesome.
the future of awesome.
Right, so there are all kinds of forces reinforcing this, and then what do we do it's great to have a family movie night, but we also need to have other things that we do as a family, right? That we get buy-in for and that we help our kids do. These are just a few ideas. This is my bathroom. I hated my bathroom, didn't want anyone to pay attention to it, so I just made it the guest book, so you can just write on the walls in my bathroom. And people love to write on the walls. These are stairs that became very quickly a climbing wall. Legos, these are just shape blocks from kindergarten. Put these out on the table. Your kids will start building with them even if they're old. Kinetic sand is one of my favorites. This silly putty, so sorry, or crazy earns thinking putty is really cool, and they've now developed it with some of that research about the 10 minutes. If you put it in your hand and you hold your hand still, at 10 minutes it starts oozing out. So it's this great reward for kind of sticking that 10 minutes out. If you have a kiddo who has a hard time having conversations with you, get them doing something physical, playing with Luna sticks, playing with a yo-yo, playing with a kendama. Oftentimes kids will talk if they're moving. Go to Asian markets, just go to Asian markets and find the wildest, most crazy, interesting thing. If your child is watching So You Think You Can Dance all the time, get some ballroom lessons. We have an amazing resource in Portland. Comedy Sports is a very affordable improv. They have improv programs for elementary, middle, and high school kids. It is one of the best ways of helping kids with social anxiety or relational skills. Let's see. Makers fairs. Most libraries now in the Portland area have makers rooms where they have 3D printers, sewing machines, all kinds of things. Having a family night in one of those can be really great. We're just going to skip the rest of these. These are ways of reaching out to me if you have questions or you want more content. But does anyone have questions right now that they would like to ask? You guys did amazingly. 70 minutes of somebody talking at you. Just blah, 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 blah. Thank you.
Embodied selves. And I love when she talks, she keeps talking But if they don't have those dangerous things, they will seek it out someplace else. So you want them to be able to do that at a young age. And that is part of living in bodied cells and in fiery environments. And I also want to say, because a lot of us here tonight don't have young children in the home, that doesn't mean that this isn't an important topic, because we are the people that can help support the young families that are living at home in the day-to-day. And we can be those mentors and those resources that say, when you're too tired to provide that for your child, we can step in and do that. We can give them models of how to live that. And I think that's really important. And I also want to say, not only can we do that, but if your kids can't talk to you, you can be that person that they talk to. And I know that for a fact because my daughter did talk to Doreen when she was in high school, and I wasn't the safe person to talk to. She could talk to Doreen. So if you're sitting here thinking tonight, oh gosh, when am I going to see that 4-year-old, that 14-year-old? You will have that opportunity, even in the grocery store line. So ask her questions, because she's a wealth of ideas and answers.
Yeah.
Well, I just have a question. I actually have my own child at ECT preschool. But I'm just wondering, so there's a lot of cartoons and things like that that are not real people, right? That are characters, but you still see these cartoons that are, out there, that are violent, they're rated PG, they're like cartoons. And I've kind of been a spokesperson for family, and my husband has my brother and her kids and that saying, yeah, he's 4.5 and it's a cartoon, but let's see what's on here.
Right.
This is garbage. Like, okay, let's go back to PBS Kids. Okay, we need people who don't have time to scan the whole show. Let's find ones that are good. I mean, and I guess what I'm asking is, how do you feel it's best to approach, I don't know, just other people that maybe your children
Yeah.
might be going to a house or something like that, and you know
Yeah.
they're going to watch it. That's a big topic, I know.
Yeah.
You say, look, we don't, even other people in the family would say, look, we don't watch just any
Yeah.
cartoon that's available on it.
I encourage people to say that very thing. And then the thing that I have found helps make it actually work is if you say, here is a list of things that my child is, ready to watch, and so if you give the guidance about it, that's where I see things change. Or you say, I brought an extra activity so that there's more to do. But no, I think too often we're just passive and we don't think about it. And the longer we can wait, again, we always want to expose that content that's developmentally ahead of them after they're developmentally ready rather than before, if we can. And then the other thing we want to do is tell our kids that it's okay to tell us what happens at other people's houses and that you won't overreact. Because that's another place where kids will find porn or violence or whatever, and they come home and they don't want to tell their parents because they don't want their other friend to get in trouble. And so, so again, saying, I know that at a certain age I am releasing you and you're going to have experiences that are troubling, come to me.
Can I ask one more question? Is there a certain age that it's okay for a child to process some of that cartoon silliness? I mean, I was thinking of course, Bugs Bunny and Roomba are
Right.
around to each other, and it's like, okay, well, I knew that was silliness, but it's like, when afterwards, it's like, well, when do you...
It's so variable. I mean, but we do know that kids, until they're 7 or 8, don't make a real distinction between reality and play or imagination. So that's kind of a good general line. If you can wait till 8. There's a big push to wait till 8 years old for any kind of that kind of violence, and then wait till 8th grade for a cell phone. So, yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah, it was, I don't know, semi-related. How do you know, I spend time with some littleish kids and they love to use my phone.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to watch Mini Force X. Is Mini Force X okay? How do you know whether Mini Force
So I would encourage, right. Common Sense Media is the best thing you can go on. It's an app, you get it on your phone, you can look it up. The thing I would say is if you are going to be consistently around littles, maybe if you have the capacity, and not everybody does, or the setting isn't right, but make a little fidget bag and carry that around and have that be the more exciting thing than your phone. You know, like and I have a list on my website of little things that you can bring with you. You know, bring pipe cleaners, bring a little like Magnadoodle or Etch-a-Sketch, you know, those kinds of things, and just be like, we're not going to use the phone today. We're going to try these things first, and then you can have time to look up your what is and isn't great.
Common Sense Media.
Yep. Anything else? I have one thing I will say, if not, and oh yeah.
I learned recently from my son who's 9 that they are showing lunchtime. They don't have a cafeteria in their school, which is kind of weird for me. Like that's where we eat.
Yeah.
We're friends during lunch. Now they eat in their classrooms, and they are showing
Yep.
movies.
Yep.
Or sometimes it's educational videos, but still, I said, are you chatting with your friends during lunch? Well, sometimes, but often they're showing movies. So like how do you
So-
change that parent that complains to the teacher all
Well,
the time?
this is the thing. I have so much empathy for teachers because their job is harder than it has ever been because our kids are really hurting. But what I have found successful, because this is just coming to my radar, so I'm putting it out again to that group of families I work with, is for families to offer to teachers, like, if you and 4 friends can say, like, at least twice a week you'd be willing to go in and be in the classroom during lunch and just proctor conversations or bring a conversation starter, and teachers have been super open and receptive to it, and it has diminished some of the screen time at lunch. So that's an idea. Yeah.
Related to that, I know, at least in our school, the reason they put those things on is because they have a very short time.
And the kids have to eat.
And the kids don't eat.
Yep.
And so that might come into play with some of it. If they're chatting, it's like, I have a very, very chatty second grader.
Yeah.
He would never eat.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I'm saying that is one of the reasons I've heard that they do those things.
Yeah.
But I have seen someone come to the classroom and read a book.
Yeah, see that, anything that is analog, so if you come in and you facilitate a conversation or read a book or do a little show, like anything. Music would be great. Okay, so this is my last thing, and it just came up when you said fiery. I have so fiery doesn't have to mean like extreme. I mean, but it just has to be extreme for who they are. So for instance, one of my favorite stories is a couple of years ago, Jesuit had me come and do a tech health week with the students. And I never tell the administration or the teachers what I'm going to do in my last talk because I know they would shut me down. And they tried to shut me down in the moment even. But in the last 10 minutes of our time together, I tell them, I'm going to give you the best 10 minutes of your week. And I want you to just, and they were, you know, it was 2,000 students all in the bleachers. And I said, I want you to come and just lay on the floor. And the teacher was like, and we do, and so at the end of every talk I give to a college, high school, middle school, did this at a middle school in Chicago last week, I have them literally lay on the floor and we do a 10-minute mindfulness meditation. And I will tell you, and the way I pitch it is, y'all, I'm going to do something, and your teachers and administration are going to freak out when I say it, but I know that you are the kind of kids that can do this with me. Make me look good. I promise you, you're going to so love this if you just trust me. Just tiptoe down to the floor. And always, every time, and at Jesuit was so amazing, I told them, you're going to be tempted to giggle, you're going to hear someone snore, and you're going to be tempted to giggle. Please make me look good. Please show me you can do this crazy thing. And you could hear a pin drop. And snores were happening all over the room. No one giggled. This is a fiery experience. So that it doesn't have to be like, whatever big thing. Just something that's novel. Thank you. The fact that you've been here to take time to do this. And Instagram is a way, I'm not able to, I get so much email with questions, so if I don't always get to that quickly, but I'm now doing some like 1-hour talks that you can just sign up and it's a Zoom and I send you a link and you get to ask the question ahead of time and I answer it live in that time. So that's a place to, if you have more that you want to interact with about that, that would be a place to do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We at Valley are committed to providing experiences like
Dory has some of her books, Device, which is the first book she wrote pre-COVID. I didn't think you brought Restart with you. So
They're
you
out of
brought
print.
Device. But one of the things I love about Device
They're
is
making
in
more.
the